Now that the soil is 40 degrees plus, these are going in the ground. We're not yet to the midway point here in April in Zone 5, Wisconsin, which means we have about another month until our average last frost date. But our beds are starting to warm up nicely, and so we're ready to plant some of our first vegetables of the spring. Guten Yardening, everybody! Now, even though we're super excited to get out here and transplant and directly sow outdoors, before we do that, there are a couple things we have to keep in mind. The vegetables that we're going to be planting today are very much cold hardy vegetables. And as long as the soil temperatures have risen to above 40 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit and the soil itself is workable, which ours definitely is, we can go ahead and get started with the planting. In fact, these vegetables are definitely cool weather vegetables that prefer that springtime planting or the fall planting, because once we get to the middle of our growing season and the temperatures rise up above that 70 to 80 degree Fahrenheit mark, they tend to go to seed or they don't grow as well. So now is definitely the time to get these into the ground, but before we put them in the ground, we have to make sure our beds are actually ready. So part of what we do at the beginning of each season is to condition the beds that we are going to be planting in. Now today you're going to see two different raised beds and an in-ground bed that we're going to be planting. So first and foremost, I've checked the temperatures of each of these beds and they're all above 56 degrees. The coolest bed that we have is the bed where our spinach is going to be planted. It's at about 56 on the nose. And the other two beds, well, you can see they're right at about 58 degrees, which is absolutely perfect for each one of these vegetables. We also know from previous testing that our pH in here is about 6.5, and all the vegetables we're planting today prefer a pH somewhere between 6 and 7.5. So we are perfectly set with our pH, but what we do need to add is some organic matter. And part of the organic matter that we've now added to these beds is from a load of compost. We got 3 yards of organic compost delivered, and this stuff is fantastic. You know that soil is filled with life, and we're replenishing a lot of that life. We're providing great environments for that life to thrive in by adding back this organic matter. Organic matter, in fact, is one of the most important things that you can add back to your soil, especially after a growing season. And if you're somebody who tills the soil, or really any disturbance to the soil, just in general, is going to speed up the breakdown of everything that's in here, of all that organic matter. And so you're going to want to replenish that year over year. So we've added about 1 inch to 1.5 inches worth of that beautiful compost that we have. And you can also see, as we look at the compost here, there are tons of worms that came along with it. These are night crawlers, it looks like to me. And so these are going to be fantastic added to our garden as well. So this is wonderful organic matter that we're adding. And on top of this compost helping us to create a great place for plants to absorb nutrients, it's also creating an environment that is going to hold on to that moisture that we need. So we're going to water less, and it's going to keep the plants even healthier. And then on top of adding that organic matter, we've started to feed the soil. We've replenished some of the nutrients that we're missing with an all-purpose organic fertilizer. And as one of our favorite things to add to our soil, we've added some trace minerals in the form of azomite. So now that we've added all that together, we've mixed it up, we've checked the temperature, we know that the pH is in great shape, we're ready to get started with the first of our 3 vegetables. So in this raised bed where we have some really nice trellising, we're going to be planting some of our peas. Now we have 2 varieties here. We have the King Tut purple peas and the golden sweet snow peas. We've not planted either one of these varieties, but we've had really good success with our Baker Creek Heirloom seeds, and so we're going to get these started. What we're planting today, we're going to be planting using this seeding square. And if you haven't seen it before, we bought it last year. It has been essential in speeding up our planting process and reducing the amount of transplanting we need to do. It's quite simple, especially if you're into square foot gardening. This is a great way to get started. And all we have to do with the seeding square is to take it down to where we want to start and push it down into the ground until it is even or level with the ground. And then we have our little orange device, which helps us to scoop the seeds, but also helps us provide depth measurements. Each one of these little lines represents 1 inch, and we're planting our beans at about 1 inch deep. We're using the yellow circles because that's about 4 inches apart, which is the recommended spacing for the variety of peas we're planting. And we just go down and we create our hole. So just like this, we've got our 6 holes. And I'm only going 2 rows out because I don't want to use the rest of this bed for the peas. I want to use the area that's going to be trellisable for these peas. These are the seeds for our King Tut purple peas, and you can see they're beautiful. They're kind of an orangish color. How nice is that? So we're going to go ahead and get these in the ground in the spots where I showed you. And I'm going to separate these out. There are 4 trellised areas here. So I'm going to do 2 trellised areas of the King Tut purple peas and 2 of the golden sweet snow peas. And as I put these in the ground, I do want to mention that there are bush and vine varieties of peas, and it doesn't matter if we're talking bush or vine varieties. It's still important to have some form of trellising available to them, because the bush variety may grow only up to 2 feet and the vining variety can grow 4 times that long. But if you don't have some sort of trellising, they will tend to flop over, and that's not going to work well when you're trying to grow a lot of peas. All right, after about 5 minutes of work, maybe less, we have 36 of these peas planted, and I got to cover them up and, of course, label them so we don't lose what we have planted here. There we go, just a piece of old blind. So we've got these labeled. Now I can go ahead and cover them up. I'm just going to do a nice little smooth over here. That's it, and they're going to be nicely covered up and ready to go. Now, one more thing I want to mention as I get started planting these golden sweet snow peas, we're planting them in cool weather. They're a cool weather crop. We want to get them in early. We want to know our full season length so that we can plant them again when it's fall time, so we can get plenty of growing out of them before it gets too hot, and then after it cools off. These are what the golden sweet snow pea seeds look like. I'm curious what you enjoy planting, what crops you find go well when planted beside your peas. Go ahead and leave us a comment and let us know what you like to plant with them. We've planted morning glories with them in the past. In fact, this is where we grew some of our morning glories and where we'll grow some of them again, I'm sure, this season as well. All right, there we go, 36 more of these pea plants. So we have a total of 72 pea plants that we have planted out here. That's going to make for some nice harvesting. So we're going to go ahead now and transplant this giant noble spinach. Now, unlike the other seeds that we're planting today, we're transplanting these versus direct sowing. We started these indoors to get a little bit of a jump start, and now we're ready to bring them out. They've been hardening off outside for about a week and a half or so. And so we're going to remove these, we're going to transplant them, and we don't really need to use our seedling square for this, although if we use the red circles, it would work just fine in terms of spacing. Really, the spacing for spinach can be anywhere from 2 to 4 inches apart. And actually, if you're planning to harvest the whole spinach plant at once, you could come in here and plant them even closer. But we usually grow these as cut and come again. Again, this is another one of those beautiful cool weather crops that we could have brought out as soon as the soil hit about 40 degrees. Now, this is just another little bonus trick for all of you. If you've ever wondered what an easy way to remove your seedlings from one of these 72 cell seedling trays is, you see the little circles underneath. You take something that's about the size, and I'm just using a little twig here, about the size of the circle underneath, and you push out, and you'll see the seedling pop out right on the top. It's a really simple way to help you with transplanting and to get these out. Again, we could have brought these outside as soon as the soil hit about 40 degrees, and we want to plant these just at the depth of the little plugs that are in here. Now, we could be direct sowing, but again, we wanted to get a little jump start by having these started indoors. So a little jump start is never a bad thing. But if we sow our spinach just about every 10 days, what you'll find is you will have wonderful succession planting opportunities for all of this. So let's go ahead and get these planted. You can see some of the root development. They're not intense roots, they're not huge. We want to get these in the ground as quickly as possible. I don't know if you can tell by how much the spinach is blowing around, but it is an incredibly windy day out here. And one of the cool things about this raised bed is we're offering these plants a little bit of protection from the wind, which is not a bad thing, so they'll get some wind. And we're also planting these on a slightly overcast day toward the evening, so they're not going to be beaten up by the sun. They're going to have time to adjust even more as they're heading into this new environment. So I'm going to go 7 across, and then I'm going to offset them just a little bit so there's even more of that room. We'll just take advantage of all the space that we can as we get these in the ground. And when this is all said and done, I'm going to go ahead and water this with some of our rain barrel water. Now, one of the things you're probably noticing if you're looking closely is that most of these have more than one spinach seedling here. And I can go through and separate some of them. I just want to be careful. I don't want to mess with the roots too much. So I may do that for the ones where there's 3 or so. I'm probably not going to mess with it too much, just in general. From that one tray of 72, we've got an entire bed. This is a 2x6, so 12 square feet of spinach. And now, we just need to give them a little water. Now, radishes have quickly become a staple in our garden. They're exceptional cold weather vegetables, and well, they're exceptional tasting vegetables. And this year we're trying some new versions of these that we haven't grown before. We have some Szechuan Red Beauty, some Japanese wasabi, some purple plum radishes which look exceptional, and then some daikon radishes which we have grown before, and we were so pleased with the results we're going to grow them again. Now, the bed we have here is like a corner bed in our property. It's the only bed where the majority of the soil is our native soil. It's a clayey kind of soil, but we've also amended this with some of the compost, and over time we've added other amendments year over year. So this is becoming a very much an improved bed for growing, and we have grown some root crops in here in the past, like these radishes, so we know that they'll grow well. Now, all the varieties of radishes we're planting here, and yes, we are going to use our seeding square, they like about a 1/2 inch of depth. Remember, the smaller the seed, typically, the more shallow you plant the seed. And so we're going to give about a 1/2 inch in depth for each of these. And you can see that radish seeds are on that smaller side. So we got about a 1/2 inch of depth for these. Now we're going to use the seeding square again for planting these radishes. They don't need a ton of space. The varieties we're planting here don't need very much space. So we're going to use the red circles, which give us the most per square foot. And I always like to throw one right in the middle there. So with a 1/2 inch of depth going the whole way around. And unlike what I did before, I'm not going to pull this off. I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to use the scoop end to grab one of these per so I don't overseed this. And I'm just going to go around to each of those holes, dropping these in. And it looks like we've disturbed a little worm. But I'd say that's a pretty good sign for the health of our soil. If we've got worms crawling up to the top, it looks like he wants to get into one of those circles. There you go, trying to find a new home, trying to move in. All right, these are our purple radish, our purple plum radishes, just like this. Seeds look basically identical. So we're going to go ahead and get those laid in here. Again, about a 1/2 inch deep. So nothing more than that is necessary. Again, the soil, once it hits about 40 degrees, you can go ahead and get these in the ground. That's no problem at all. And one thing you want to keep in mind is that once the temperatures outdoors hit about 70 degrees plus, the radishes don't like that at all. But they can grow in just about any kind of container. We've had fantastic luck growing in anything that's about 1 inch or 2 inches of soil. That's really no problem whatsoever. And so if you want to give it a try, I mean, we've grown them in container lids. It's that simple. So even if it gets hot out, you can find places to move these around, and so they're in the shade, you can still do okay. That's something to keep in mind. But definitely these are an early crop and then a fall crop. They grow really well when it's nice and cool. So I planted about a 6 squares of each variety here, of each of the 4 varieties. And so we had some space here at the edges, and that's where our 4th variety went. So we're going to get well over 300 radish plants out of here. So you can see how simply that square lays things out. And when you get to a spot where the square doesn't fit, you can either try to overlap just a little bit, or you can just poke the holes in because you can see the pattern. Really simple and really exciting way to get 300 plants in the ground. Well, you can see the sunlight is deserting me now. An end of a nice day out here in the garden. It's so great to be able to be back out here. We got so much accomplished tonight. We were able to get 3 of our favorite vegetables out here, our early season vegetables. We have 3 beds that are going to grow into some fantastic produce in just over a month. So be encouraged to get out there and get started. It's not too soon. There are vegetables ready to go. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.